You were, what, living in Kendallville or living around here?
No, I
when
was
the war-
actually living, when I went into the service, I was living in Mishawaka.
Ah,
Yeah, I'd had a job up there. In fact, I got that job. Are we recording now? Okay. I got that job. I found out about it on a Friday. And so on a Sunday, December the 7th, 1941, we were on our way to Mishawaka. My folks taking me up there.
how old were you?
I was 19. Yeah. Maybe only 18. I don't remember really. And anyhow, and we had the radio on, and it came on that the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor. And we said, well, where's Pearl Harbor? You know, we didn't have knowledge of the world in those days. And so, yeah, the war started the day I took that job. And I worked that job for about a year, I guess. Yeah, a little better than a year. And then I went into the service. And Camp Perry, Ohio, to Texas. Took basic training in Camp Alders, Texas. And then went directly overseas and joined the 29th Division. And the very first day I got there, we began training for the invasion. This was in May of 1943. So we started training a year before we actually had the invasion. I suppose we invaded England, I don't know how many times. They would pick out an English beach off the English Channel that was very similar to the Normandy beach. So now England had all kinds of hedgerows, but you know, they never told us about the hedgerows in France. They never mentioned the hedgerows.
You think it was on purpose?
Well, I don't know. Maybe they thought because we had trained in the hedgerows so much in England that it would be automatic, I guess. But they never did train. I know one time, and then there were a lot of dry runs. A dry run is something that resembles the real thing, but it isn't. And I know one time we had been on some ships and landing barges and invaded the coast of England one more time. And then they said, in a little bit, we'll send you down to get your K rations. Well, K rations were what you carried in combat. It was just a meal in a box. Now that's the first time they had ever given us K rations. And we all thought, holy moly, this is going to be the real thing. We're going to get on those boats and go right back to Europe, you know, go across the English Channel. But it turned out to be another dry run. But they added the K ration bit to make a more complete exercise, I guess. But that was a little bit scary when you thought, well, this is the real thing. But when the real thing came, we left our camp there in southern England, and we took us by truck to I don't know, at Portsmouth. I don't know the name of the barracks or anything that we were in there. And we were there for 4 or 5 days before we got on the ship. Now our company got on an LCI, Landing Craft Infantry.
The big long...
It was a bigger ship, and the whole battalion was on there. 1st Battalion. And
Did it have all those little landing crafts on it too?
No. We got off of that ship right onto the land. That went. We didn't get on another landing craft.
Did it have one of those things on it?
No, it had gangplanks one on each side of the ship, and we unloaded that way.
On the beach?
On each side of the ship. So while some of us were loading off of the left side, others were unloading off of the right side of the ship.
Mm-hmm.
So you got off quite as fast that way. And I know I was the first one out. I was scout for the company, well, for the battalion for that matter.
What battalion and company were that?
This was the 1st Battalion, and I was a part of B Company of the 115th Infantry Regiment, 29th Division. And we were the only National Guard outfit involved in invasion. The 1st Division was regular Army, the 4th Division was regular Army. And the parachute battalions were regular Army. Now the glider, that group was created just for the invasion, but they were a part of the regular Army. But we were National Guard outfit. Maryland was the home base for B Company, Hagerstown, Maryland. And most of the guys in the company were from Hagerstown or the surrounding area. But we, of course, we were all ready to go the 5th. That was the day that we were supposed to land. Go across the night of the 4th and land on the 5th. But had a storm in the English Channel, so they postponed it 24 hours. And that night, the captain got us all up on deck and told us what was going on, this type of thing. And then he said, everybody will write a letter home, and you can tell them that you're going in on the invasion. Of course, every letter we sent home was censored. If you said anything that might give away where we were, they cut it out. Mm-hmm. And of course they had what they called email. They took a picture of your letter and sent that. It was much smaller than your letter itself. Mm. But anyhow, he said, everybody will write a letter. And he said, for some of you, this is the last letter you're ever going to write. Mm-hmm. Now that was pretty sobering. Mm-hmm. That was pretty sobering. I know one time when we were having a briefing, when we were still back in camp there, they talked about the end of the first day. We were supposed to be inland about 7 or 8 miles on the edge of an area that had, it was inundated, a swamp area. It had about 2 inches of water in it, they said. And they talked about it, and they only talked about 3 or 4 days. And so I asked the captain, I said, well, I don't know about the rest of you, but I plan on being around after 3 days. Where do you go then? And he said, straight to Berlin. Well, it didn't quite work out that way, but then that was the whole plan. So they did that. We didn't go in that night, but we all wrote the letters. We all wrote the letters. And
so you spent that night on the ship?
Oh yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, we'd been on there for 3 or 4 days already, and pretty crowded. And, you know, I don't know how many all together made up a battalion, but it wasn't a lot of room to move around. Excuse me. So on the 6th then, or the night of the 5th, we took off. It was still pretty choppy, but I took a couple of seasick pills, and I slept like a baby. I didn't notice a wild way, ship bouncing or anything. I was asleep. And about 2:30, maybe 3 o'clock in the morning, I woke up and I could hear cannons firing. The battleships were shelling the shoreline. So I got up and went up on deck. And of course it was dark, but when they opened up and fired those cannon, like they'd fire 6 of them at a time. And it just looked like the whole side of the battleship was on fire. The fire from the muzzle of the cannon was lit up, you know. And it was just an amazing sight. And that, okay, so we got in there, and as I was going down the gangplank,
Once you hit the beach, or?
yeah, once we got to the beach, I was going down the gangplank, and a machine gun opened up from somewhere. I don't know whether it was one of ours or
Were you pretty
one of
close?
theirs.
Were you pretty close to the land that time, or were you in deep water?
No, we were not in deep water. It wasn't bad at all, really. We were more fortunate in that way. Now, we went in on the second wave,
On which beach?
Omaha Beach.
Oh, that was one of the bad ones.
Yes, that was the worst one. And the beach was not totally cleared yet, but it was cleared enough that our ship was able to get in close. But that machine gun opened up, and I dove the rest of the way off of that gangplank. So I've always said, if they make an Olympic event out of gangplank diving, I've got the record. I've got the record.
How far did you fall?
Yeah, I have no idea.
You just went in head first,
I just took off, yeah. I just took off. And Julie, I do not remember going across that beach. I have tried and tried.
So you don't remember once you...
Once I landed, I remember landing because I remember looking at the beach, and it was kind of coarse gravel-like. And I think I expected sand, but it wasn't sand. At least not right where I was. But
could you see a lot of the casualties at that point?
I have no idea how much later it was that I got across that beach, and I was up pretty high, and I sat down, and that's when I turned around and looked out over the English Channel, and all of the ships and boats and tanks that you could imagine. I couldn't see too far to my left because there was the channel changed directions then, but to my right I could probably see a couple of miles anyhow, easy. And that's all it was just like a bunch of debris on the beach. That's the way it looked. But I had that same feeling that you mentioned, that Harding mentioned to you, that what the American people had really come through for us and has given us the equipment that we needed to get this job done. There was never any doubt in my mind but what we would be successful. Now, I've read since then that there was some thinking about withdrawing the end of that first day, but it never happened.
Because the casualties were so bad? Or?
Casualties were very high, yes. And of course the Germans said, we've got to stop them on the beach. We've got to stop them on the beach. If we do that, we'll repel them. We'll send them back into the water. But by the end of the day, that hadn't happened. We were able to get across that beach.
So when you say you were in the second wave, does that also mean the second day?
No.
Or you were in the second wave on the first day?
The first wave went in about 6:30. And we went in probably an hour, maybe an hour and a half later.
Oh, so very close to the first wave.
We were right behind them, so to speak.
How many waves went in then, that first day, do you know?
I suppose there were support troops that came later on throughout the day. You couldn't take a tank in on the first or second wave, but they would come in later. And of course artillery would come in a little bit later with the bigger guns and stuff like that. I really don't know about how much was behind us,
When you were sitting on the beach, do you remember where you were at? Like, were you up against a tree or up against
No, it
one
was
of the...
sand. It was probably up 30 or 40 feet above the water.
Ah.
Because I could see a long ways. I could see a long ways.
So they had already made a little bit of progress to get up off the flat beach.
Yeah,
By then.
yes, they had. Yeah.
So it was kind of maybe
Yeah.
like a little sand
See,
hill. or something.
the schedule was we were going to be on the edge of that inundated area the first day, which was, I don't know, 3 or 4 miles inland. We probably got in 1,000 yards the first day.
Was that where they had the big high ridge?
Well, this ridge that I turned around and looked at was pretty high. I don't know. No, it wasn't. You see, there's not remembering going across that beach blanks out what fortifications might have been around there.
Yeah.
And I just don't
Maybe
know.
you were on the, because in some of the movies and things they show, you know, that the Americans came in and then they had to go up.
Yeah,
onto
well,
a
this
thing.
was an incline,
Oh.
and probably, I don't know, 200-300 yards off the water edge,
Mhm.
at least that, anyhow. I
So
don't
that
know.
must have taken a lot of work to get to that point.
Well, evidently,
If the
but I
Jew-
don't,
if the-
don't remember doing it, and I don't know what I had to do to get there.
'Cause
I
if the
just-
Germans were trying to stop you from getting up, and
That's
you
right,
were,
yeah.
and you were there,
Yeah.
that
Oh,
was,
yeah.
were there
yeah.
a lot of guys around you at that point?
I can't tell you that either. I
Uh-huh.
don't know. I just don't know.
Huh, you just remember looking
No.
and seeing
no.
you didn't seeing the people.
Cogan probably was taking care of Cogan
Yeah.
at that time. And, but then we did assemble, and at nightfall, General Bradley was there.
Were on the beach with you?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And, well, we were just off the beach, although it probably today would be part of the beach proper, but we were up and off the beach a little bit. And I know we were standing there, our platoon lieutenant was Lieutenant Chadwick from Vermont. And he had joined us maybe 3 months before the invasion. He wasn't there all the time. But he just calmly pulled a cigarette out of his, or a pack of cigarettes out of his pocket and started to light one up. And I said, "Sir, do you really want to light up that?" It was dark. "Do you really want to light that cigarette?" And he looked at me, shook his head and put it back in his pocket.
You might have saved his
Yeah,
life.
because you know at night you can see a light a long ways.
Yeah.
And a cigarette light is the last thing you'd want to see around there. But it was an improbable thing that became possible. It just, now that I look back on it, it staggers my imagination that we were successful. Although, and this is something else, and I know that if I told this to some guys who were there, they would say that I'm a damn liar. But, Julie, I was not afraid. Why, I don't know. I don't know. But I knew we were going to succeed in this whole thing. And the day that I got shot, and I got hit 3 times that one day. The first one was a shell fragment, shell fragment. That was early in the morning, wasn't even daylight yet.
Was that the second day?
Oh no, this is, I don't know how many days later.
Okay.
And I don't know how many miles inland we were.
Mhm.
You know, I didn't have a watch and I didn't have a calendar. The only thing I
Didn't have a
knew.
GPS.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I didn't have a computer. But we were moving up early in the night, or in the morning, and this mortar shell landed probably 30 yards over to my left, right among us. And a little fragment of that hit me in the neck. I didn't even know it until about noon. I took my backpack off, and there was blood on the strap. And I thought, well, where did that come from? So I got to feeling around, and there was blood up there. And I never even said anything to anybody. Never wasn't hurting anything, so I didn't say anything. But that evening, about 5 o'clock, a German, and I was only 15 feet away from him. He shot me in this right shoulder.
Did you see him?
Yes, just out of the corner of my eye. And before I could whirl, he got me. And it knocked me out for a little bit. And then maybe half, three-quarters of an hour later, then I got hit in the left leg, up by the hip bone. And that took me out of action.
When you got hit, you were in the hedgerows.
Oh, yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. We were well into the hedgerow country then. I don't know how many miles inland we were.
Were you walking on the roads between them, and the Germans were in
Well,
the
this
hedgerows?
guy that got me in the hip was in a tree right above me.
Huh.
And like I said, I saw the other guy, he was behind a tree over there.
So there were some
There
snipers.
we lost a lot of men down there that night, that day, that evening. Yeah.
Did somebody
And
take care of that German in the tree?
No. I'll tell you about that in a minute.
Okay.
There was another guy right there beside me. This is after I got hit, and I couldn't walk because the bone was completely broken in two. In fact, it was sticking out of my leg.
Your big one?
The big bone in the leg, yeah. And but this guy from Thomas was his last name. I can't remember his first name right now. But anyhow, he'd been hit in the arm, but he could walk. And he said he was going to go back to the aid station, find an aid station and get his arm taken care of. And I said, well, you tell them that I'm down here. He said, okay, I will. Well, nobody ever showed up. And I was out there all night. Well, during the night, I heard that guy come down from the tree. I had my rifle with me, but there was a hedgerow right there beside me, and he came down on the other side of the hedgerow and left. Otherwise, we might have had a little fun. I don't know what would have happened. I have no idea what would have happened.
Did the guys in your company keep going at that
Well,
point?
no, they withdrew. They
Oh.
withdrew. And it wasn't until probably close till noon the next day that they came down there and found me. And I lost a
Amazing.
lot of
I was
blood.
going to say, amazing you didn't
I
bleed
lost-
to death.
I lost a lot of blood.
Did you have to like put a tourniquet on yourself or anything to?
No, but they gave us sulfur tablets. They gave us a dozen of them. And if you got hit, you were supposed to take 6 of them. That was to help the blood thicken up and stop flowing. And I thought, well, if 6 of them does a little bit of good, 12 of them ought to do a lot of good. So I took all 12 of them. Just shows you how much I know about medicine, you know.
Might have saved your life.
Well,
I don't know.
Who knows? Who knows?
I mean, the way you were talking.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but they put me on the hood of a Jeep and took me to the aid station. And then I went to a field hospital and they put me in a body cast. And then probably I couldn't have been there more than 2 days. I really don't remember. In the field hospital, long enough to get the body cast on. And then they put me on a plane and flew me back to England. And I was in England hospital, I don't know where in England, but I think it was pretty close to Liverpool, but I'm not sure.
Really?
Because I remember the nurses talking about going into Liverpool.
Huh.
And I had them buy something for me to bring home. And I've still got part of it up there. I should have got that down here.
What was
But
it?
it was just a salt and pepper deal on a little wooden tray, like, yeah. And yeah, they got that for me to bring home. And then when I went overseas, I went over on the Queen Mary. When I came home, I went home on the Queen Elizabeth. So I traveled in style each time, although this, going back, I was in that body cast and you know, I couldn't move. There was a guy in a bunk right across from me. His name was Gene Rosansky, and he was a reporter. And he said he worked for the South Bend Tribune and a paper in Orlando, Florida, that he wrote for those two papers. And he'd gotten some shrapnel in a leg. A shell had burst and he caught some shrapnel, so that's why he was going back to the States. And I don't know, it took us about 5 days to get back, but one of those days, second or third or fourth day, a couple of the guys who could get around, they were on crutches or maybe had their arm in a sling or something like that. They brought a guy down to talk to this Gene Rosansky. His name was Ernie Pyle. So I got to meet Ernie Pyle.
Cool.
Yeah, yeah. And then Ernie was coming back and he went over to the Pacific and he lost his life over there in the Pacific then. But I didn't really get to talk to him, but
How neat.
it was nice that he was right there. I could have reached out and grabbed his leg if I'd have wanted to.
Cool.
Yeah, yeah. So back to New York in the hospital for a while, and then they would locate you in a hospital as close to your home as possible. So I was sent to Billings General in Fort Bend Harrison in Indianapolis. Then my folks came down, my wife came down to see me when I'd been home, maybe been back there, and I'd been home, but back there. And I was in the hospital for the better part of a year, I guess.
Really?
And you know, they went back to duty, and the war was winding down. This was in, well, the war in Europe had already ended in May. It ended in May. In August, I think it ended in Japan, didn't it? I've forgotten right now.
45?
Yeah.
Was it before
And
the bomb or after
They
the
got
bomb?
something like, yeah. I know. The duty that they sent me back to there at Fort Bend Harrison, they had an ammo dump. And they also had German prisoners of war. And they did the KP, they did the cooking for us. And, but they had to guard that ammo dump. So that was the duty that I got when I discharged me from the hospital. And one day, I don't know how long I did that, a couple of 3-4 weeks, I suppose. I decided I'd go over to the hospital and see if any of the guys in that ward that I was in were still there. I ran into the doctor who had taken care of me. And he said, "Man, you should be in here now." He said, "We're discharging them like mad." And I said, "Well, how do I get back in here?" And he said, "Tomorrow morning, you go on sick call." That's the only time in the 2.5 years or a little better than that, that I was in the service that I went on sick call. That's the only time. He said, "You go on sick call." He said, I'm going to take care of the sick call people tomorrow morning, and he said, I'll put you back in the hospital, we'll get your discharge. So that's the way I got out of the Army. Yeah. So that was my military career. Wrapped up rather quickly.
Cool.
But it made me a better person.
Why is that? And how is that?
It changed my thinking from me to the whole world, really. To the whole world. I just, and I think I've become anti-war. Become anti-war. The World War II was the last, if you can use the word, was the last popular war. You make it? Korea, we're still there. Vietnam, very unpopular, unfortunately, for those GIs. A war is a war. And all that practice that you do, like our invading England all that time, excuse me, the thing that is missing, that you don't learn anything from it, is nobody is shooting at you when you're doing this practice landing.
How different is that feeling?
You know, and
I mean, how does that make you feel differently when someone's shooting at you than when
well,
you're just practicing?
you knew that was going to happen, and it did happen a lot. They gave me a rifle, and you were expected to use that rifle if the occasion occurred. And it did on several occasions. And then of course the Middle East, that problem I don't think is ever going to be solved in the Middle East.
I think
Those people have fought each other.
I think they'll have to solve it themselves.
But I don't think they're willing to do that.
Then I don't.
They're not willing to sit down and talk.
I agree with you that it'll just be the same.
Yeah. So, and it's unfortunate. Every GI who's gone into there and had to carry a weapon and be exposed to gunfire from the enemy, and to fire at the enemy, is a person who is doing something very, very special, and no one realizes what's involved in that unless they do it. Hollywood can't show it to you. The Longest Day was an excellent movie. I watched that several times, and I think it's a very accurate account on the way things happened that first day. If I could have remembered my part. But so many of them, they tend to make the war a glamorous thing, and it is not. It is a dirty, bloody, stinking mess. And
Did you get to see Private Ryan?
beg pardon?
Did you get to see that movie, Private
I
Ryan?
refuse to watch Private Ryan.
Because people have said it's...
They told me the first maybe 25, 30 minutes of it is pretty gory.
It is.
Yeah.
They said it's it's a more, kind of an accurate portrayal of
More realistic.
what it would have been like.
Yeah.
It's almost too realistic. But it made me realize, wow, what those guys went through.
Yeah.
No wonder you can't remember it.
Yeah.
You're probably running for your life most of the time.
Yeah.
So you came back here a changed person, huh?
Yes.
Do you think a lot of people did? A lot of the guys did?
I would think so. I would think so. And hopefully for the better.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the things that turned the people off about the Vietnam War was, I remember the television reporting about the drug use among the GIs, and to me that was disheartening. You know, why punish your body like that?
Do you think they just couldn't deal with the reality of
Well, that
what
could
they
be.
were
I
in?
don't know. I don't know. Maybe they felt the hopelessness of the whole situation. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe they didn't have that feeling that they were going to succeed, which they ended up not succeeding.
Well, and you know how you had that feeling of the support from people. Soldiers in the Vietnam War didn't necessarily have that feeling of support.
I think maybe
You know,
that could be well be true.
They
Yeah.
talked about they would get off the field, the battlefield, get in the plane, get on the plane, step off the plane in LA or wherever,
Mhm.
and people weren't as excited
Yeah.
to see them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think today's soldiers, people are able to separate the war from the soldier
Yeah.
and say, I don't agree with the war, but I support you
Yeah.
as a soldier.
I think those of us back home here for Korea and Vietnam, those two wars especially, and maybe it's because I had been in one,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see the purpose of the war. Korea was a battle between the north and the south of the country. Well, why did that involve us?
Mm-hmm.
And the same way with Vietnam. I could see trying to repel the communist part of it, because I firmly believe the communists were determined to rule the world. And they had that idea for a long time. Maybe some of them still do have it, I don't know. But, so I thought there was a bit of necessity to the Vietnam situation. But it was just never, the country never really got behind the wars. And then in Vietnam, it became political too. And that's a bad thing. That's a bad thing. And unfortunately, if there again for the GIs, I respect every one of those guys that wore that uniform and faced the enemy.
And it was a different war in Vietnam.
Oh yeah,
You guys
entirely different.
You
war.
guys had the front lines, and you knew where they were. In Vietnam, the front line
Oh
could
yeah,
be
it was
they
any
could
place.
be in your camp
Yeah,
that
that's
night.
right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
That would be scary.
Oh yeah, no question about that.
Wow.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't know.
Did serving in the war, how did that change your life afterwards? Did it change in maybe what direction you went after the war?
Well, yes, because of the GI Bill, that was a big thing for me. It allowed me to go to school that I probably wouldn't have. I know I didn't have any money, and you know.
Was it something you had hoped to
The
do?
per hour wage in those days was maybe 60 cents an hour or something like that, and yeah, that, and I felt differently about myself.
How so?
And I've never really talked about this, I guess, before to anybody, but I never felt when I was growing up and through high school and immediately after, I never felt a purpose in life. You know, why am I here? What am I supposed to do? That type of thing. And I think so the war gave me a perspective that it woke me up, I guess. It woke me up.
And what did you think your purpose was after the war?
Pardon?
What did you come to realize that your purpose was after the war?
It took me a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
I was in one job and out of the other. I didn't like any of the jobs that I had. You could probably train a chimpanzee to do them if you kept bananas for him all the time, you know. But and I always wanted to be a teacher. I remember when I was in the 4th grade, I was going to a one-room school over by Skinner Lake. Just one room in that building there.
Is that on 500 and 100?
The one that goes straight south from Skinner Lake.
Yeah.
Yeah, just about, would be about the equivalent of a block from Road 8 south was the schoolhouse, Jefferson Center. And Lester Neal was a teacher. And I don't know why, one day I was there looking out the window. It was noon, I think, and she came up and stood there and we talked a little bit, and she said, "What would you like to be when you grow up?" And I said, "A teacher." And she said, "You hold on to that." And I did. I wanted to go to school, but I didn't have any money, and my folks didn't have any money, and just, you know, was out of the question.
So did the GI Bill then come out a couple of years later? And then
The GI Bill came out while I was in England. And I thought then, I really didn't know much about it, except it was something that would help us to get an education or into some kind of a training program or something like that. But I didn't even check into it when I first came home. In fact, I didn't check into it until I was in September of 1949. I got laid off, and I don't even remember where I was working. Some factory in Kendallville. Probably not even there anymore. But anyhow, I came home and I was married then, and I told Joe, I said, "Tomorrow I'm going to Indianapolis to the VA. I'm going to see about going to school." So I went down there the next day, and they gave me some tests, and I was good enough on the results that I could go to college. And they said, "Where would you like to go?" And I said, "Ball State." And so they enrolled me in Ball State right then. But I didn't start until December. The fall, they were in quarters at that time. You went 3 months, end of quarter, 3 months, end of quarter, 3 months, end of quarter. And so I started this in December, the second quarter in Ball State. And I was so dumb about, you know, because that was one thing. I never thought a country bumpkin like me had any business going to college, you know. That was for the smart people and with money, those with money, you know. And that was the kind of person who went to college. Well, I found out there were a lot of country bumpkins in there just like me, you know. But the first day of class, I couldn't find where my class was. I didn't know how to read the schedule of classes, and it was a science class. Well, I didn't know where the science building was, so I didn't get to class that first period, but the second, from then on, I made it all right. I told the prof the next day that I said, "You got a dummy here. I didn't know what to do," and he kind of laughed. He'd been in the service himself. His name was Stevenson. I don't remember what his first name was, but he'd been in the service himself. He kind of laughed, and And I went through Ball State in 3.5 years. Well, of course, with the GI Bill, you had to go in the summertime.
Oh,
They had 2 5-week sections in the summertime, and you took 2 classes. So you took 4 classes the way you would in a regular quarter. And I did all right. My grades were not good to begin with. I didn't study too much in high school, and so I didn't know how to study for college. And that took me a good year, maybe a little better. I probably, the first year I was a C+ student, but I ended with a B+ average.
good.
So I got better as it went along. Yeah.
You know, I'm interested in what you were saying about you didn't think you could be a college student and be that smart. You know, it sounds to me like a lot of GIs in your situation probably gained a lot of confidence by going to school, and it maybe helped our country as much when you got back and
Oh,
learned
no question about that.
learned to do that
Yeah.
and realized, hey, we can do something better. That it was that helped equalize our country.
Well, you see, I grew up during that Depression. I was born in 1922, and the Depression came in '29, so I was just 6.5 years old, excuse me, when the Depression hit. And so I really don't remember too much of those 6 years, but from the 6 years on up, I remember a lot. And I remember we had nothing. We lived in houses where we didn't pay any rent. The people were happy to have somebody in them, so they just didn't deteriorate so much. And
How'd you get by? Just whatever
sometimes
work
we
you could.
didn't, I think. I think if it hadn't been for my grandparents, sometimes we wouldn't have had anything to eat. I'm serious about that. I'm serious about that.
Because back then they didn't have.
And my oldest brother pretty much lived with my grandparents because there were 4 others of us back home that Mom and Dad had to feed. Their legs were still under the table, you know. They had to be fed. And it was not easy. Then to top it off, my dad had what they called in those days double pneumonia in about 35 or 36, right along in there, 1935 or 36. And he really couldn't work after that. I remember they had to saw a couple pieces of his ribs out in order to get tubes in there to drain his lungs. And he was in the hospital for long. I don't have any idea how they paid the hospital bill or if they paid the hospital bill. I have no idea. And it just...
Do you think things are as bad now as they were in the Depression?
Beg pardon?
Or do you think the recession now is as bad as
no
the
comparison.
Depression?
No comparison. No.
Do you think it's because
See, we got 7.8% unemployment now, which is bad, I'll agree with that. In the 30s, it was better than 20%.
And the difference too is back then they didn't have unemployment insurance.
That's right, yeah. That's right. Yeah, there was no unemployment compensation, there was nothing.
So what did people do then? They just kind of wandered around?
Everybody had a garden, for one thing. And of course, I wasn't old enough to really understand in the 30s, late 30s. Of course, I started in high school and you began to grow up a little bit then. But I remember I had a terrible inferiority complex simply because we were so poor. I had one pair of pants, overalls, bib overalls, and I'd wear them all week and Mom would wash them Saturday while I had another pair of little short pants, I remember, that I wore over the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, was not pleasant times. And that became a part of my personality, I think. That's why I thought I got no business going to college.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm one of the have-nots.
Do you think you've changed that personality over the years? Do you have more confidence now?
Well, I hope. I know I feel much better about myself. Although, even today, and I've had this happen not too long ago, a very good friend of mine, Steve Demblicki, his dad was in the 29th Division, not in my outfit. Mm-hmm. He was in the 175th Regiment in artillery. And, but his father has passed away. But because of that, Steve and I had formed a good friendship. Mm-hmm. And on different occasions, he has said to me, don't sell yourself short. Don't sell yourself short. And so a little bit of that complex, I think, is still here, still with me. But like, I am honored and a little bit embarrassed by the attention given to me because of this.
That's my next question.
Yeah.
Was how you feel about that. Because that's pretty cool.
This is the medal that the country of France gave to every one armed forces personnel that was involved in help chasing the Germans out of France. Now, how many thousand of those of us, I don't know. But I wasn't the only one. I really didn't do, this is not an individual medal for me. It's a medal that's given to everybody. Napoleon started this in 1802 when he gave it to his troops for chasing the enemy out of France in 1802. And then they gave it to the GIs of World War I. Mm-hmm. And now, here, 68 years later, they're giving it to the GIs who landed in D-Day and others who came later, but were still helping to chase the Germans out of.
Do you know why they waited so long?
Yeah. But it's nothing that I did. I was just one of several thousand who chased him out of France. But, so, it's a little bit of embarrassment to me, and I've had nice write-ups of paper. The Kennewill paper has been so nice to me and about me, and you have done it too, and I appreciate that very much. This is a very fine thing you're doing here. You've already talked to Harding, is that correct?
I did a story on him a few years ago.
Wendell Beck is another one.
Is he?
He's rather unique. He served in World War II in Europe, and then he got called for Korea.
Oh.
Yeah.
Now, one thing about this award, you were talking about you were one of many that helped. Did you ever hear of a lady here in Avilla named Marie? What's her last name? She was a resident of France at the time. She lived in France.
Somebody told me about her.
And she told me the story from her side of living in that country at the time of the Nazis. So if, Harvina Richards?
Yeah.
Talk to her. She knows, I'm pretty sure she knows Marie. Because I can't remember. She lives out west of town. But to talk to her about what it was like to live under the Germans, I think would help you understand what an impact what you guys did made for that country, and why they want
I'm sure.
and why they want to honor you so much.
Yeah.
Because their lives were bad for those what, 4 years that they lived under the Germans.
See, this lady, Carol Duval, she lives in Verville-sur-Mer, France. She was instrumental in my getting this.
Aw.
Not getting it. I would have gotten it eventually. Bob Harding is still waiting on his. But she took my papers and,
How did you connect with her?
well, a year ago, last October, I attended the reunion of 29th Division at Martinsburg, West Virginia, and she was there. Miss Carol Duvall was there, and she was telling them about this organization that was getting the GIs from World War II who would help chase the Germans out of France, getting them lined up to get this medal.
Aw.
And we became good friends. I was there 3 days, and I know I spent a lot of the last 2 days talking with her, and we've become good friends. She speaks good English, by the way. And in fact, I just talked to her yesterday. She called me and talked to me. So she was instrumental in me getting this. And her father was 11 years old and living in Verville-sur-Mer, which is about in the center of Omaha Beach, where the 29th Division landed
Wow.
on D-Day. So her father remembers very well the German occupation and the landing on D-Day.
Did she tell you how did the French survive that?
No, she never really went into that, and I never really questioned that. Although, if the good Lord is willing, and I've still got enough health, and I can find enough money, I'm going to go to France in this coming March, the latter part of March, and to her house. And I'm going to be there maybe 10 days. And I'll find out a lot more then.
Have you been back?
Yes, I was back in '04 for the 60th anniversary.
Is that when they dedicated the, what is it, a memorial or something?
Yes, yes, they did. They did, that's right, yeah. Forgotten about that. And then I went back again in '08. I found, when I went there in '04, we had there was a French family, Brilliat is their last name, and Jacques and Sylva Brilliat. And I met a daughter, Chloe. She was a sophomore in high school at that time. She has since, of course, graduated. She's a very good musician, and she's now living in Paris, and she has a band that accompanies her, and she sings. They have a nightclub act, or they go different places and do that. And in fact, she called me one day. The daughter, Chloe, speaks good English. The mother and father don't do too well. In fact, I called them the other day, and they had a terrible time. We had a terrible time talking. I was telling them that I was going to come at the end of March, the latter part of March, and I would want to see them, of course. And so I'm looking forward to that. But I'll find out more from Carol when I get over there.
When you went back before, did you go down to the beach?
Oh, yeah.
Where you landed
Yeah.
and tried to see different
Yeah.
spots?
Well, I don't know exactly where we landed. It wasn't where we were supposed to land, I know that. Because, I don't know, circumstances that I don't know about said we'll have to go over here, go over there, and go in instead of where we wanted to go in. Probably there was too much debris in the water that the boat couldn't, the ship, I shouldn't say boat, ship. Had a Navy guy correct me on that one time. I called him, I said, "What boat were you on?" He said, "I wasn't on a boat, I was on a ship." But yeah, that
What did you think when you were back, or what did it feel like?
it was so quiet.
Mm-hmm.
It was so quiet. There's a picture laying right there on the counter if you want to get up there of Normandy Beach.
Oh, this one?
Yeah. That's the beach the way it looks today. Normandy Beach. Very quiet. Thank you.
Pretty beach?
So I don't know. I know I have changed. I've probably changed more since I've gotten older
Really?
and smarter and can analyze things a little better. You know, there's an old saying, we get old so soon and smart so late, you know. and
If
I
I
think
knew
that's
then
true.
what I know now.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, yes, yeah. And but I've survived.
I think the measure of it is, do you feel like you lived a better life because of it?
Yeah. Oh yes,
You know?
no question about that. Going to school was the smartest thing I ever did. That's the smartest thing I ever did.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I didn't have to take an English class. My grammar was good enough that I didn't have to take this one class, but I thought I'd take it anyhow because I think I just felt I needed to have it, you know. And I remember the prof's name was, his last name was Wetmore. Wetmore. Don't know his first name. Dr. Wetmore, that's all I know. And he did a lot of, he just take the daily newspaper and say, now, you take that first sentence here and tell me the breakdown of each word. Preposition, phrase, or this is a preposition, or whatever, noun, verb, adverb, that type of thing. And at the beginning of that class, I could not do that. I could not do that. But on the last day of class, he had each one, and the class wasn't all that big, maybe 15, 18, let it go. 15, 18 people in it. He had me do a whole paragraph. I went through there, got every one of them right. He just applauded. Just a second.
So when you came back then, you taught and did a lot around here in education.
Yes, I started at the old Avilla High School.
As a teacher?
Taught history and speech. And then I got the chance to go to Leato Elementary School as a principal and teacher. So I was down there for quite a while and ended up in Montpelier, Indiana, that's where I was when I retired.
My grandma and grandpa lived down there.
Beg pardon?
My grandma and grandpa lived down by Keystone.
Yeah, yeah.
When you were teaching and a principal, did you find that the way you taught or handled the kids was different, maybe because of what your experience was? Or maybe, you know?
Oh, no question about that, yeah.
How was yours different than
Yes,
someone else?
I think the whole educational system has done a 180-degree turn since then.
What was it like when you got into it?
Well,
How has it changed?
now, the thing that bothers me about today's education is if the whole computer system all over the world broke down, nobody would know what to do. Because it looks like we're depending on the computer for all the answers. And, you know, and newspapers are going out of business. Magazines are going out of business. And the people who manufacture and sell these laptops and whatever else, computers, they think everybody's got a computer. And they, on TV they said you can reach us on the website www.com and so on. Well, I don't have one.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I'd be a Neanderthal.
Well, when you started teaching in the 50s, was the way you taught different than the way people had taught before that?
Not too much, no. No, it was still.
I wondered
pretty much
if your
the
experiences in the
No,
military
no,
had kind of changed.
No.
Okay.
No.
So but you see where you were that is different than today.
Yeah, no. But now, somebody told me the other day they were not teaching writing anymore in schools.
Not cursive.
That's it. You don't need to write. You're going to go to a computer, I guess.
Well, I don't know how they're going to sign their checks.
Yeah. I would like someday, you can call it a hope or a prayer or whatever, but someday some child would go up to his father and say, "Dad, what's a war? What do they mean about a war?" And he'll say something like, "Well, they had wars years and years and years ago, but we don't have them anymore. People are living together in peace now, and we don't have a war." I hope that happens sooner than what I think is going to happen. Thank you, Julie. Thank you.